Assalamu alaikum. This is Wali from Rehan School Teachers Training Institute, Batch 24, Level 1. And today my topic is discuss how to practice self-compassion and forgive yourself. So let's welcome Maya in our channel, The Wisdom Talk, for this conversation. So hello, Maya.
Like Wasalam, thank you for having me back on the Wisdom Talk. I'm so happy to be here to dive into this with you. Self compassion and forgiveness are such vital pieces of the growth puzzle. I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay, so I am moving to my first question. What does self-compassion really mean and why is it important in our daily lives?
That's a great place to start. At its core, self compassion is the practice of treating yourself with the same kindness, care, and understanding that you'd naturally give to a dear friend. Most of us have this amazing capacity to be supportive and patient when someone else is struggling, but when it's our own turn to fail or feel overwhelmed, we often switch to a completely different script. We become our own harshest critic, using a tone with ourselves that we'd never dream of using with anyone else. It's essentially about acknowledging your suffering without judgment and remembering that imperfection is just part of being human. In our daily lives, it's so important because it creates a safe internal space to actually learn from our mistakes. When you're stuck in a loop of self blame, your brain is too busy panicking to actually solve the problem. But when you approach yourself with compassion, you lower that stress response, which allows you to stop spiraling and start moving forward with a much clearer head.
Okay, so how is self-compassion different from self-pity?
That's such an important distinction. It's easy to confuse the two because they both start with acknowledging pain, but they actually move in opposite directions. Self pity is a bit of a trap. It's a mindset of why me that can make you feel isolated, like you're the only person who's ever struggled this much. It keeps you stuck in the problem and can actually lead to feeling more alone and defeated. Self compassion, on the other hand, is much more grounding. It's about recognizing that suffering and failure are universal human experiences. Instead of asking, why me, you're reminding yourself, this is what it feels like to be human. It's a shift from isolation to connection, where self pity is about drowning in the emotion. Self compassion is about holding your own hand through it so you can eventually stand back up.
Okay, so
Hmm?
why do we why do we often find it easier to forgive others than to forgive ourselves?
It's a total head trip, right? We're usually so much softer with other people because there's a healthy distance there. We can see the whole picture and the context of why they messed up, which makes it a lot easier to be graceful. But when it's ourselves, we're right in the middle of the noise. We don't just see the mistake, we feel the shame, the regret, and the weight of it all in real time. The problem is that we tend to believe we should be held to a higher standard than everyone else. We judge our own intentions far more harshly than we ever would judge someone else's, which just makes that gap between how we treat others and how we treat ourselves feel huge.
Okay, so why do we often find it easier to forgive others than to forgive ourselves?
Exactly what we were just diving into. It really comes down to that distance. With others, we're the observers. With ourselves, we're the judge, jury, and wait, a salad? I don't think I mentioned anything about food. Pretty sure we were just. Oh,
Okay, so let's
my
move to
bad.
our topic. Uh, how
No
can
problem at all.
we how can we learn to speak to ourselves with kindness instead of criticism?
The best way to start is to simply notice the inner critic when it shows up. We often let these critical thoughts run on autopilot, believing they're true just because they're loud. The first step is to get some distance. Try thinking, I'm having a thought that I failed instead of I failed. It sounds small, but it shifts you from being the victim of the thought to being the observer of it. From there, you can ask yourself, would I say this to a friend? That's usually a pretty quick reality check. If the answer is no, you can consciously replace that harsh line with something more supportive, even if it feels a little fake at first. It's like building a muscle. The more you catch the critic and pivot to kindness, the more natural that supportive voice becomes.
Okay, so what should we do when we keep thinking about a mistake we made in the past?
That mental loop is the worst. The first thing to do is acknowledge that the thought is there without fighting it, because trying to force it away usually just makes it louder. It's helpful to remind yourself that you're judging your past self with the knowledge you only have now. You're essentially punishing a version of yourself who didn't know what you know today, which isn't really a fair fight. Once you see it that way, you can ask what that mistake actually taught you. If you can extract a lesson from the experience, the mistake stops being a dead end and starts being a stepping stone. It transforms the memory from a source of shame into a piece of evidence that you've grown.
Okay, so how can we stop blaming ourselves for things that were beyond our control?
That's a tough one because we're wired to want to feel in control, even if it means taking the blame for things we couldn't possibly change. It's easier to feel responsible than to accept that sometimes life is just chaotic. A good way to break that cycle is to actually map it out. Write down the situation and divide it into two lists. What was actually in your power and what wasn't? Seeing it on paper usually makes the truth a lot harder to ignore. When you realize that the outcome was decided by things you couldn't influence, the blame starts to lose its grip, and you can finally start to let it go.
Okay, so will you please tell us that how can we turn our mistakes into learning experience instead of source of shame?
It's all about curiosity. The moment we feel shame, we usually go into defensive mode. We want to hide the mistake or push it away. But if we can swap that shame for a bit of curiosity, everything changes. Instead of asking, how could I be so stupid? We can ask, what actually happened here? It turns the mistake into a case study. When you analyze the mechanics of what went wrong, you're no longer the problem. The process is the problem. That's how a mistake stops being a reflection of who you are and becomes a piece of data you can use to get better.
Okay, so how can we take responsibility for our mistakes while still being kind to ourselves?
That's the real magic trick of self compassion. It's the difference between I made a mistake and I am a mistake. Responsibility is about owning the action and the impact it had on others, which actually requires a lot of courage. Kindness is knowing that making that mistake doesn't make you a bad person. When you separate your worth from your performance, you can actually apologize more sincerely because you're not spending all your energy defending yourself from shame. You can say, I messed this up, I'm sorry, and I'll make it right without feeling like your whole identity is crashing down around you.
Okay,
Yep.
so what are some signs that a person is being too hard on themselves?
One big sign is a constant internal dialogue that sounds more like a drill sergeant than a friend. You'll notice it and think the should have loop, where you're obsessing over a past version of yourself that didn't have the information you have now. There's also that tendency to dismiss your wins as luck while treating your mistakes as proof of a fundamental flaw. Another subtle sign is the feeling of being frozen or unable to start something new because the pressure to be perfect is so overwhelming that the fear of failing feels like a physical wall. You're so welcome. It was a real pleasure.
Okay, thank
Thanks for
you.
having me on the show.
Thank you so much, Maya, for being with us for this conversation.
My pleasure. This was a great one. Can't wait to see how the recording turned out. Anytime.
You covered my topic very nicely. Thank you so much. And see you again on the same channel, The Wisdom Talk, with another topic. Until that time, Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz. Can't wait to see what topic you bring next. Take care.